Hi, welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new here. My name is Mike, and today we're going to be wandering through just a portrait editing tutorial, starting off in Lightroom and then moving into Photoshop. The model's name is Anna, absolutely brilliant model. And we're going to start by creating a virtual copy of our original raw image. Command and apostrophe. On PC, that would be Control and apostrophe will create a virtual copy. Sits alongside our original image, means we don't have to affect the original. It's like a free copy. And what I'm going to do is work my way down. White balance, flash. There's no shot with flash. It's just going to warm things up a little bit. And then, as with my other tutorials, I don't really play with the exposure and the contrast settings because I find them very heavy-handed. I'm going to move down to the highlights. I'm going to take them down a little bit. Let's say to about there. And I'm going to increase my shadows quite a bit, just to give it a bit of a boost. I prefer having a flatter image to start working with. So let's give them a little bit of a boost as well. So I want this image to be quite saturated. Back that down. Texture, clarity, and dehaze, I do not touch them either. You're usually okay putting in maybe up to 10 maximum on these, and the only time I really use dehaze is when I've shot underwater images. Vibrance, on the other hand, I'm going to boost that actually by quite a bit. What I usually do is I'll take it all the way up to the maximum end of the slider, all the way back down, just so you can see roughly where you'd like it to sit. I think somewhere about there. Looks nice. Saturation, I'm going to leave behind. Here we go. Shadows, midtones, highlights. As explained in previous videos, if you just click and drag, it will move all of them. So it affects kind of everything, so we don't want that, so let's delete that control point. What I do is I put a dot there, just click on the line for the shadows, there's one for the midtones, there's one for the highlights. Now if I move either one, it doesn't have as drastic an effect. Not like that. Wow. Definitely didn't want to do that. There we go. So aim for your control point properly. And I think before I move on, actually, I'm just going to check I have the profile corrections. Yeah, enabled. I'm going to leave that on. Once again, if you start with it on, great. If you don't start with it on, I always tend to just leave it where it is. So if you set it right from the start, that's brilliant because you can work with it. If you set it afterwards, well, it just tends to mess up your image, really. Let's move down into some color grading here. Start with the shadows first of all. Let's go the opposite way. I'm going to take them a little bit cooler. Once again, take it to the extreme and then dial it back. That looks okay. And there's the midtones. I'll take them a little bit warmer. Highlights I'm going to leave. And moving down onto our detail and sharpening. Masking, if we hold down our option key and click, it shows you everything that is going to be sharpened. So that's everything at the moment. As with a normal mask in Photoshop, it's white, it's being affected. If it's black, it's not. Keep hold of the key and drag to the side, and that will limit your sharpening more to edges. So I want very little sharpening on this. So there we go. I don't want to apply any sharpening to skin or anything like that, just around the eyes, just a little bit of just a touch of sharpening. So probably about, I mean, that's going to be enough, I think, for now. Moving down, I'm not going to do any kind of noise reduction. This was shot at ISO 100. And that's already checked. No transforms needed, no lens flares or effects. I'm not going to add a vignette because I'm going to mess around with the cropping when I move into Photoshop. Calibration. I'm going to leave the tint here. Yeah, because I don't want to take it too much like that. I want to control the tones individually. As always, if you double click on the name, it will reset your adjustments that you have there. So once again, all the way, other way. So I want to go more towards the magentas and purples, but not too much. So we're just about there, and let's see about maybe boosting the saturation a little bit. So about there. Moving into greens, doing the same. A bit cold and blue. So I want to head this way with it, but not a vast amount again. Let's maybe go 17. A little bit of a boost in saturation as well. And blues, don't tend to mess around with the blue too much. Because, yeah, let's just leave it as that. And I think that this is going to be my base to start from for moving into Photoshop. Command and E or Control and E will open the image in your editing program of choice. Before I do that, I'm just going to nip up here to my Lightroom Classic and preferences. I've answered a few questions this week on forums just about the external editing and a few things that I've picked up. First off, before I move down, this is your where it's going to edit. So I'm using the new beta of Photoshop at the moment. I'm going to change that for now to 8 bits because I don't need 16-bit at the moment. 300 DPI. A lot of people leave this as default as 240. 300 I'd set it to. And stack with original. This means that when you edit in Photoshop and you save it, it will put the image next to your original one as well. So here we go. Just going to press Command or Control and E. There we go, it's loading up. There we go, perfect. Okay, so we've just arrived in Photoshop here, and what I'm going to do first of all is I'm going to duplicate my base layer with Command and J or Control and J if you're on a PC. I'm going to zoom in a little bit, and this is just the first thing that I do to get rid of any blemishes that are bigger, that would be more of a hassle to cope with in frequency separation. So shortcut J just for the patch tool, and I'm just going to just go over, draw, click and drag like this hair. Just going to go around, move it slightly to the side to get rid. Doesn't need to be perfect. We want our models to have some skin texture and everything. The way I usually work, though, is I will work through at quite a heavy frequency separation and everything, and I'll just dial it back if you need to. And just outlining any bits that are jumping out as maybe being a bit distracting to the overall image. Stay as close as you can to the area that you're cloning, because you don't want to jump from different skin texture to different skin texture. Like most noticeably, usually around the eyes and everything, because under the eyes has different skin texture to even directly underneath it. So I'm just going to get rid of just this hair here. And this is looking okay so far. Let's go to that one. Try to avoid any very obvious cloning. And if you're going anywhere near any areas of very high contrast, it's often better to use the clone stamp tool rather than the healing brush, because it sometimes gets a bit fussy and tries to clone in like a blurred area around it, which is a massive pain. Okay, so there we go. So I think what we'll do is that's about okay for moving into frequency separation. Awesome. Right, so I've duplicated my layer. I'm going to go into my actions. Frequency separation, 8-bit. There we go. So what we can do here is click within the image and it will show a preview there. So I know the sweet spot for my camera and this lens combo is 9. But so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put 9 and I know that's going to be about right. If I zoom out a little bit, you'll be able to see the detail disappears, but you still have the tones. The image hasn't fallen apart like this. That's not what you want. That's way too much. This, not enough. So you have to find it. It's a bit of a balancing act, but I find between, let's go 9, between 9 and probably 12 maybe is about right. So I'm going to go with 9. Here we go. Okay. What this has done, rather, is create our high frequency layer, which is the texture and all the detail. So we turn that off. And the color and light layer, which is our low frequency, and a layer in between for doing any additional color work you need to. I'm going to click on my low frequency layer, the color and light one. I'm going to duplicate it with Command or Control and J. And I'm going to bring out my lasso tool, shortcut L. And my goal with this is to just draw around a selection. I'm going to feather it with Shift and F6. When you're not anywhere near any real high contrast layers, you just have to kind of gauge your feathering levels. I'm going to go with 8 because we're not too close, not too far away. And then I'm going to hide my selection. I won't do this every time, but just so you can see what's really going on with it. So filter, blur, Gaussian blur. And what that's going to do is blur the image underneath. So see, I've taken it right the way up there and it's blurred all the colour together. You have to find a nice in-between area. So you see that spot there? Just watch how it just disappears as I get a little bit higher up. So there, I'm going to go with that one for this. And then just click, so it deselects everything. I'm going to go around again, Shift and F6. 8's fine. And this time I'm going to press my shortcuts. So that's Control, Command, and F to repeat the filter. So click to deselect that. Now, what I'm going to do, pro tip for this, because I'm zoomed in very close, I can't really see how it's affecting the image overall. So I'm going to go to Window, Arrange, New Window for the file name that we're working on. And that's created an exact copy of my image. What I'm going to do is just place that at the side here. Zoom in all the way to 100. Should have just done this the other way around. And this one on this side, I'm going to zoom out. Just because I prefer working on the image on the right rather than on the left. So I can keep, obviously being right-handed, it's just easier. Here we go. So I can now see what's going on with the image. And everything I do to the right-hand screen here will be reflected immediately within this image over here. So I'm going to make my selection around there. Shift and F6 to feather. Let's go with 12 for that. And I'm going to hide the selection. Now, when I apply the filter again with Control, Command, and F, watch this image over here, and you'll see how on both of them it's affected. It's affected both of them, essentially. It's the same image. It's just a whole separate window for it. Moving down, Control, Command, and F. Yeah. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to keep doing exactly what I've done here. I'm just going to even out the tones. I'm going to make my selection. I'm going to feather. I'm going to apply my filter. If you come up to any areas that you think might be slightly problematic or a bit difficult, then just adjust your filter down, hide your selection, and then you can go back into filter, blur, Gaussian blur, and just adjust the amount. You might not want it quite that much. Might want it a little bit more. So there we go. Nicely there. So this one, and draw around it. Now, because we've got quite a few areas, we've got very light, mid-tone, and dark there. I'm just going to apply maybe like a 12 on the feather. I'm going to hide it. And instead of just repeating the blur, I'm going to go to filter, blur, Gaussian blur. There we go. That actually looks okay, so perfect. And same with here. Now we're getting a little bit close to this area here, so I'm just going to move that up. Shift F6, move it to 8 pixels, but I don't want it to feather up far too much. There we go. So I'm glancing from the left to the right screen all the time just to get a good gauge of how it's affecting the image overall. And I think just this little section here, I'm just going to use the brush layer one in on that. So let's click into here. Let's go over to there. Zoom out a tiny bit. I'm going to go to my brush tool. Make sure I'm on soft round pressure sized brush. You Option and Control and click. I'm going to hold that. I'm going to drag upwards so the hardness is 0%. I'm going to set the flow to 1%. So I'm going to hold down Shift and press 0, 1. So that's set the flow very low. I'm going to go into my eyedropper. Make sure it's on 5x5 average, or one of the other averages, 11x11, 5x5, or 3x3, 11. Not point sample. What I'm going to do is just click there. It's my brush. Make sure I'm on the brush layer. And I'm just going to gently blend that in just a little bit. And here. So it doesn't stand out quite as much. So we can see on the smaller image that's looking much better already. Okay. Right. I think I'm just going to add another brush layer. So Shift, Command, and N, or Shift, Control, and N. I'm going to call it Makeup. Here we go. I'm going to use the Option key or Alt to bring up my eyedropper. And I'm just going to choose the black there. And nice small brush. Zoom into 100% or even closer. And I'm just going to turn it up from 1% to maybe 4%. Shift 0, 4. Give it a little bit of an outline so we can see on the smaller image it's just going slightly around. Yeah, just adding a bit of a line, a bit more dynamic to it. There we go. I think that will do for the makeup layer. I quite like the makeup as it is on this image, so I'm not really going to mess around with it too much. So we're going to turn on the high frequency layer again now, and just have a quick look over and see if anything needs to change with this. I'm going to go back to J, which is my clone stamp tool, and just have a quick look around. So maybe this just here just helps if you're on the actual layer. So high frequency, let's just move across with that a little bit. As I said, staying very close to the actual area we're cloning from. I think looking at this one, that's working out absolutely fine. So don't want to do away with too much of the detail. We can tone the frequency separation down, which we'll do now. So if I close down the group, then you can adjust the opacity of it. So if we take it all the way down, you can just see the difference. It's a nice subtle difference. Don't want to go far too over the top with it, but there we go. Let's leave it at 88%. What I'm going to do, I'm going to close this window down now by just clicking. Move this one back over. There we go. And I'm going to zoom out a little bit more. I'm going to sort out the edges here because it was a little bit gauzy at the sides, which means it's bulked out a little tiny bit, and there I need to get rid of this bit here. So because I'm perfectly happy with the frequency separation, I don't need to keep it together with that. So I'll just select the both of them and I'll merge it together. If you aren't so sure, keep it all structured together and use Shift, Option, Command, and E to do a full stamped copy of everything instead of merging it together. So I'm just going to go with S for my clone stamp tool. I'm going to drag downwards a little bit just to make the brush slightly harder. probably about there. I'm going to click. I'm on current and below, so that's fine. I'm just going to take that bit out there. Maybe turn the flow up slightly to maybe 30%. Just going to take some of the rough edges off. It's around here. There we go. I'm going to duplicate this layer and I'm going to jump into the liquify. Brush smaller once again. So this area where it's sticking out slightly because of the mesh, we don't want to shape that way. So we're just going to nudge that in very slightly, and it goes there as well. Be very careful of like your backdrop, especially if you're working against straight edges, because you can tell immediately when any retouching like that has been done. There we go. As I said, very minor, just being picky and for the sake of the tutorial, to be honest. So that's great. Let's go to OK. Oh, I'm going to crop the image now. I'm going to flatten everything down because I'm perfectly happy. Actually, no, I'm not. I'm going to keep that background layer. So I'm going to merge down, Command and E or Control and E. I'm going to crop because I much prefer to work in a 8x10 style format or a 4x5. If I click, it's going to bring up this. Now, on yours, when you do this, you might not be able to see the extent of your canvas. So I believe it's Shift Option H. Yeah, there we go. Shift Option and H will show or hide the extent of your. But that way, if you're cropping upwards, like because I feel this needs a little bit more space, to be honest. So I'm just going to move that down to there to transform from that point. Okay, I would normally crop this using generative expand. However, for some reason out here when I'm working, it takes forever to actually do it. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to hop into the crop tool. I'm going to make the image a little bit bigger from that point. And then I'm just going to use it as the background. What I'm then going to do is make that a selection, feather it by a few pixels, and then I'm going to fill it with content aware fill. I'm now going to add in some textures into the back. So just select subject. Okay. I'm back in the room after that took an unbelievably ridiculous amount of time. The signal out here is terrible, so it didn't actually manage to do the cloud selection, which means it's obviously a lot rougher than it would be. I'm just going to hold down Shift on the lasso tool and just fill in. This doesn't have to be a particularly good selection, this, because I'm just adding some background texture in. So to be honest with you, that'll be absolutely fine. I will save that as a selection. Select, save selection, and new channel. Okay, so moving into the textures over here, I'm just going to bring this one in. Hold down Shift. There we go. Command and T to transform it. I think should actually be okay. I will load my selection, which is on this mask, and apply the mask, invert it because I want it to affect the background. And I'm just going to feather this out a little bit to try to just compensate for that absolutely horrendous selection it made. So yeah, just going to feather it a little tiny bit. Maybe take the opacity down the tiniest bit. And what I'll do is I'll move this one in as well. Let's transform that one too. There we go. I'm going to apply the same mask. So I'm just going to hover over that. I'm going to press Option and drag, and that will copy the mask over to it. And then this last one, I'm going to drag in, set that up in the corner, just like that. It's affecting everything a little bit too much, like that. So what I'm going to do is just double click on it. I'm going to use Blend If. I want to take it away from some of the shadows. If you click and drag in, it will immediately just get rid of it. It's got a very hard edge, which we don't want. So if we hold down Option and click on it, then it will feather what you're doing. So it's a much softer transition between it. So we just want to take some of that away from the shadowed area, but not too much. Maybe about there. Okay, awesome. What I'm going to do now is we're going to move on to some of the color grading. I'm going to click there. I'm going to apply a gradient map to begin with. I'm just going to group all this together and just call it adjustments. Color lookup. Color lookup table. So let's put that in first. That's what I like to start with because it kind of affects absolutely everything. So I'm going to put a 3D look file in, and I think maybe the 2395. Yeah, there we go. It was a nice overall look to the image. However, it's very in your face. So I'm going to turn down the opacity on it. So press V, maybe 25. Actually, yeah, 25 looks about right. Just gives it a bit of a boost and a bit of a lift. Now I'm going to do my gradient map. I'm going to set this to color, and I'm going to use on my pastel ones. Now I'm gonna choose this one. This is not the one we're actually going to use. I think what I'm going to do is the color I want to choose for this. I think I will stick with like maybe a little bit more of a turquoisey blue, maybe something like that, because that'll counter the purple. And on this side, I think we'll go with more of like a greenish and a turquoise, maybe a little bit more green to counter the reds. Yeah, maybe something a bit like that. Yeah, there we go. And okay, obviously going to lower the opacity of this. I think probably we're going to need about 10%, maybe 20. 20 is too much, maybe 15, right in the middle. Yeah, about 15% for that one seems to sit quite nicely with it. I think we will do a selective color now. So moving now into the whites, neutrals, and blacks. See, this will have a much more noticeable impact on your image. So this is where you really start to tune it. You can always go back and revisit any bits you've already changed, obviously, but that's about right for white, neutrals. I don't want to mess with that too much. That's quite a huge impact on that. So if you have an idea in mind, because this is very pink and purple, so I know I want to nudge the colours this way rather than towards the greens. So it's just fine tuning it until you get to, roughly so more towards the purple. So I know I'm coming this way for this one, but I don't want to do too much. There we go, and into the blacks finally. I think more towards the reds a little bit. Don't want to make it too cold though. So I tend to add in a little bit of yellow to each of them. So I'm happy with that as that goes. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put in a curves. I think for the general adjustments like that looks nice. I'm going to create a curves layer over the top. As always, I'm going to set this to luminosity because then it will not affect the saturation of what I've done underneath. Zoom in a little bit. Now this is just for the eyes. I'm not going to put the dots in for the shadows and highlights. I'm going to go with that. I'm going to invert the mask, Command and I, and I'm just going to use my brush with the soft edge. Let's get a little bit closer. I'm just going to choose a low flow, 4% should be fine. Left double click. I'm just going to add a little bit more brightness with on the iris. And I'm going to do a separate one. I'm going to duplicate this layer. Do the whites of the eyes instead. So once again, luminosity. Normally got this set up as a shortcut. So reaching across my keyboard is a massive pain at the moment, so we're not going to do that. So this is for the whites of the eyes. Don't want to do too much. Once again, just want to add a nice little bit of brightening to the eyes rather than going really over the top with it. There we go. I think that we definitely need to boost saturation in the back here. Maybe we take that down a little bit. I'm going to apply a hide all mask for this by holding Option and clicking, or Alt, and clicking on the mask tool. And I'm going to use my radial gradient to just draw in from the side slightly. Just to make it a little bit brighter. There we go. I'm now going to create a dodge and burn layer using curves. I'm not going to use my shortcuts, I'm going to walk through it. So, curves, set to luminosity, which shortcut would be Shift, Option, and Y, or Shift, Alt, and Y. And I'm going to take this down to there. I'm going to duplicate the layer. Now this is the opposite, so I'm going to draw upwards with this one for the highlights. And then I'm going to invert the masks so they're both hidden. So this one's the burn tool, and this one is the dodge. So I'm going to go into my burn tool, the darker one. I'm going to choose my brush, low flow, and I'm just going to darken. And then I'm going to switch over to the dodge one as well. There we go. So if I group these two together, Command and G, then you see how much of an impact that's had on the image. And I'll just put in a vibrance adjustment again. I'm just going to turn that up a little bit, and the saturation as well to give it a real boost. I don't want it to be affecting everything like it has done though. So I'm going to use the mask from this one here, and I'm going to copy it to that to replace it. So there we go. So it's now only affecting the background. Bit of sharpening, and then I think we're done. Command, Option, and E to do a stamped copy. Filter other high pass. And before I do that, I'm going to zoom in to 50% because I find the line gets very lost. Filter other high pass. 1.3, maybe going up to closer to 2. Yeah, there we go. So you can see the outline of everywhere is going to be sharpened. And we're going to set this to either hard light, vivid light, or linear light. So that's soft light, no effect. Hard light looks quite nice, bit of a kick. A lot more contrast in vivid light. So between vivid light and hard light here. So I think I prefer the boost in vivid light. So I'm just going to do that. I'm going to hide all, brush 50%, so good flow on it. And I'm just going to go around the edges that I want to be sharpened. Obviously don't want the skin to be sharpened. So I'm just going to work over the hair and the choker. So as I get close to edges, I'm just pressing a little bit lighter so it's not flaring out and making a massive brush and affecting the skin as well. There we go. I think we're going to call that one done. So if we group everything together, and here's the after, then we have the before, there we go, and there's the after, before and after. At any point, if you feel like you've overdone things slightly, you can always dial it back. One pro tip, you can actually take your original image, and if you create a duplicate of it, so if let's say we make a copy of this and we'll put it up on top of everything, so hold down Command or Control and press the bracket to up bracket, so that then you can actually lower the opacity of it all the way down and maybe turn it up just a little bit by bit. So you see it's bringing back more of the original natural image over the top. So what we could do is we could say maybe like a very low opacity. If we zoom in, be able to see it much better. So as I dial up the opacity on this, you'll see it's bringing the original image back over the top. We want with this, I think, to about there is just nice. So I'm going to leave that on the top there, drag that in, and then we have our before and after. Obviously, with the bar being at the top here, we do not want that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply a layer mask, gradient, straight down gradient, and then I'm just going to blur that bit out. There we go. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you've all learned something, picked up some tips and tricks. And as always, thank you so much in advance for any likes or subscribes. They are massively appreciated. I will see you in the next one. Have a good one. Bye-bye.